everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This is the Darklight Emissary, and this video is going to be on the Halo Stars region of space. This is sort of like the Ghoul Stars region we spoke of a couple of videos ago. However, this area of space is even more isolated in some ways than the Ghoul Star region is. We do know a bit more about it though. There's a bit more information on it than the Ghoul Stars, so maybe I'm incorrect on that. But one of the main points to kind of start this whole thing off, and what intrigued me about this region, is that the Halo Stars are one of the only areas that the Great Crusade and the Imperium did not explore at all, or conquer anything in during the Great Crusade era. So it leaves it open to, having 10,000 years of its own development, and very few expeditions and fleets of, Imperial ships have gone into there. Individual rogue traders and explorers and some of the Mechanicus forces have explored there, but otherwise large swaths of it are unknown space. And I always love the mystery areas of Warhammer. We don't often get a lot of that. A lot of stuff is kind of known quantities. The Space Marine chapter that we love, the Blood Angels or whoever is going to fight these demons in this book, and that's great. We love the combat and fighting, but I think one of the untapped things in Warhammer to a large degree is the amount of mystery and intrigue and just weirdness that you can do with this universe. There's some truly spooky horror vibe, Lovecraftian style horror you could do, just all kinds of really cool things. So this region is perfect for that. And ironically, reading through about this region, turns out that part of this region is actually a focus of the new Rogue Trader game that just came out, the CRPG that just came out, which I was unaware of. Makes me a little more interested in going and checking that out, and I think with future expansions, they're going to pick maybe some of these worlds. I really hope they do, because some of these worlds are ripe for exploring a mystery, which I would love to do. That all being said, it seems like to me that 20-ish minutes for these videos are about what people are interested in, so I'm not going to be making this a super comprehensive video on everything about the Halo Stars region. I'm going to be picking out some of the planets and systems that I found most interesting when reading about it and kind of giving my thoughts on those. So here are a couple of different planets and regions to go over here, and I hope you enjoy this. There's a lot of really cool stuff here. So the first planet to speak about in this area is called Burnscour. This planet is basically, it's a death world that is just full of thick, completely strong, strange fungus and vegetation and really large beasts and monsters and, insects that, eat into flesh. Just anything that you can think of that's deadly, it seems like this world has. And so you would think that, it would be avoided, but actually a lot of hunters go there because a lot of the gladiator type entertainment areas of the Imperium especially use the creatures from here to entertain the masses basically. And so hunter cadres will come in vulcanized rubber and get dropped by a dropship and essentially try to capture one or two beasts and then get out of there, because even the rain apparently eats through metal and armor. There's acid rain. The plants try to eat you. The plants grow so fast that sometimes they will burn an entire area for a landing area because it's just so thick. They'll burn the area out in one area, and then they will land there and go into maybe one of the forest areas on the side that is still standing, capture what they need, come back to that area, and get picked up by their dropship, which never lands. It always drops them off and then kind of does an orbit and waits for them. And within only a few weeks, that area will be regrown taken back by the jungle. It grows that fast. It's like this very virulent, fetid swamp jungle planet. There is a creature on this world known as a stalker, which is said to be the size of 3 grown men, and it's apparently a very silent hunter type of predator creature that moves silently through the trees. There are insectoid beetle type creatures who are just as happy to gnaw through flesh as they are to gnaw through sap on trees. Just basically anything on this world will try to kill any human on the world, and everything basically wants humanity off of it. The acid rain makes it impossible to build bases there, or at least too expensive to make anything worth creating there. So all the expeditions here are very short and meant to grab some beasts for some profit to sell to anyone that wants one of these beasts, and that's really it about this world. It just seems like a very hostile type world that you wouldn't want to visit in this region of space. This next region of space within the Halo Stars is called the Agarian Dominion, and it's the remains of a Xenos empire of some kind. The aliens themselves are not given any sort of description on what they are, but their structures are built in these belts that are hundreds of meters high and just structured and packed together very tightly. The passageways are very tight for humans, so speaks to like some kind of smaller entity that lived there. And one of the most interesting things about these structures is that there are channels fixed into the buildings to funnel the light from stars all the way down to like the deepest depths of these structures. Nothing of significance seems to live here in this desert anymore, and the calamity that befell the xenospecies is not known. All that's left is these empty maze-like structures and not much else. Doesn't seem like there's many artifacts. Doesn't seem like there's really anything that traders or other explorers have found here worth of any value other than these abandoned structures. These structures in this area kind of remind me of some of the abandoned Native American adobe type buildings that are out in the deserts here. I've visited a couple on some hikes out here, and they have a similar feeling of like this empty, quiet place, and makes me think of that when I think of this place too. These like alien takes on maybe a Pueblo type structure just in the sand and dry soil, and just there's also a similar mystery somewhat with some of the Native Americans about what happened to them. So I wonder if some of this was inspired by some of that, but I digress. Anyways, this area seems interesting to me. I could totally see this being a setting for a book or something where, like it kind of plays with your mind a bit. There was a Tanith First and Only book that kind of had a world sort of like this, where they were stationed in this structure in like this kind of dry desert area, and there was just something wrong with the structure, something wrong with the psychology that it was like influencing the soldiers with, and this could kind of play with a similar kind of nameless doom sort of thing. And that's actually one of the things that it talks about, is that a nameless doom left this world desolate, or these worlds desolate. All the worlds, there was a cluster of them that this empire had, all have similar structures and similar abandonment, and no real evidence as of yet as to why. And that's really it for this one. Really like it though. I love any world with a mystery on it. The next region of space to talk about is known as the Foundling Worlds. This is an area of space that is relatively close to the Coronis Passage, but it is not explored very much because despite being closer to basically the proverbial entrance to this area of space, there is a lot of sudden warp storms and temporal distortions and other things that just make it hard to navigate here. And so there are supposedly charted routes, but a lot of these routes are also fall prey to like not being an actual charted route, or if it is, that still doesn't mean there's no danger taking that route. So this area of space has not really had much success with any kind of colonization by Imperial colonists, nor anything else seemingly. There is some speculation about this region that maybe it is being hidden on purpose and protected by something, maybe an advanced xenospecies, or even, my theory, I would love it to be like a shard of an old dark age of technology, human empire or something that is able to keep anything out that doesn't want it to come into this region of the Halo Stars. That would be something cool like that, I think. That would be awesome. Now, possibly one of the most horrifying places in this region of space that is at least known is known as Grace. This planet was once a palace world, basically, founded by a rotator named Aspis Corda. And this world was that for a while. There was a lot of palaces built, and basically there was a lot of imperial exiles of wealth and criminals of wealth that built this place up into kind of this pleasure planet, pleasure place. And it was paradisical for a time. Eventually, a warp storm, though, swelled up and blocked the passageway to get there. So this world became completely isolated from any supplies. For a time, the people of this world survived on supplies that they had, but eventually the supplies dwindled and the warp storm did not subside, leading to the followers of these wealthy to start pillaging each other for supplies. And wars were fought over these supplies in battles, and a couple of the palaces became fortresses to protect against the others that remained. And then they ran out of so many supplies that basically they became a group of cannibals. So there's a couple of small bastions of people here, but they all just eat humans, and they mutated into some sort of version of human that has to survive on human flesh now. And they apparently have beacons that project distress signals, hoping that travelers come so that they may eat them as well. So it's certainly a place that is thoroughly damned in a lot of ways, and probably one of the more boldly, distinctly horrible places to run into if you ever were exploring this region of space. A large chunk of the Kronos expanse in the Halo stars is known as the Accursed Domain. This area of space is not explored very deeply, like much of the expanse. There is apparently a couple of clear routes through it that are protected by a couple of the navigator houses that first found them, and possibly have bases here to ply their depths and get the wealth for themselves out of these places. But it is a place of cataclysm, misfortunes, and apparently ghost vessels. So, sightings of haunted or abandoned ships that should be dead still operating somehow. And there is orcs here as well. So there is apparently a whole domain of orcs. So, there's not a lot going into here, except for maybe in a few specific areas. And they guard their secrets very deeply for this area. Now, one of the most active factions in this region of space is known as the Disciples of Thel. This faction is a sub-faction of the Mechanicus. They have the most explorer fleets, and they explore a lot of this region. They probably are one of the few human-based groups that know the most about it, but they guard their secrets jealously and don't really, let anyone know much about any of these areas of space. And one of the planets that they do know about is a dead world known as Illisk. And this is part of the Accursed Domain area of space. And this planet is very fascinating. It's a machine world that has giant cogitation arrays that are packed beneath every part of the crust. And there is giant antenna sticking out, apparently 10 citadels, and each of these giant citadels is a hive city in size, and the corridors that are tens of kilometers long are crowded with the remains of whoever built it, the Xenos corpses, and these corpses have filaments that still link into the machines from when they were first jacked into them. There's not much else said about this place, but it sounds very fascinating. It reports that it seems like the surface has been strip mined anciently, and that geothermic heat is vented through shafts that are bored into the earth, and that the surface is basically windswept and dead. And so the only sign of life is this weird, not Forge world, machine world built by aliens, and it seems like the Disciples of Thel are active on this world, applying its secrets. This would be an interesting world to do, again, a type of horror-styled game, imagine, being an explorer of the Thel faction. You're, down in the depths of this place, and there's just these empty hallways, and maybe something stalking you through them. I don't know. There's just a lot of potential here for some fun, with this sort of planet. Just the visual of, like, being on the surface, and there's just these gigantic looming antennae that are left over from a dead civilization. And, you then enter into them and, see remains left over from them. And you're kind of trying to piece together what, doomed this species. And maybe you'll get too lucky in finding that out. That would be kind of my premise for something with this world. It's definitely one of the more interesting ones to me. Now, briefly mentioned before, there are orcs in this region, and they are at the very heart in a cluster of worlds. This empire is known as the Undred Teeth, or Hundred Teeth, if we're translating that to our language here. And this world, these worlds and this empire are a bit unusual for orcs, apparently, because there is a lot more rich, arrogant, as they're called, flashgits, which are kind of like rich orcs, basically. And they love treasure and love to raid and pillage more so than your average orc does. Now, the theory is maybe because the region itself is so rich in treasure and things like that, that it's born these types of orcs, but that's a theory and not proven. What is known, though, is that they love to accumulate their wealth and more powerful war gear amongst each other and amongst Xenos and rogue traders and things like that. Some of these flashgits are hireable by rogue traders and other species in the region. And that's really all I'll say about the orcs. They are orcs, just like any other orcs at the very end of things when talking about orcs. But the only other thing of distinction about them is apparently there's a gigantic space hulk that orbits one of their worlds, and millions of orcs apparently live just on this one space hulk. So this area of space is pretty dangerous, and apparently there is the potential of a waw out of this area of space from these orcs eventually, and might just rampage right on through into the Imperium, but that's yet to remain to be seen. Now, one of my personal most interested areas of space within this region is called the Heathen Stars, and they're aptly named because apparently there are, without a doubt, some human societies and communities in the Heathen Stars that are not part of the Imperium, and apparently have never heard of, the Emperor, have never heard of Primarchs, have never heard of Space Marines. They don't know about the wider human community. And so it would be very fascinating to have something set exploring this region of space. Are they lost shards of the Dark Age of technology? Do they have, some leftover STC technology that is unknown to the wider Imperium? It would be very interesting to see, what these humans, what these empires are. And it would be interesting to see them done justice in some novels or in the new Rogue Trader game. Just something in this region of space would be really cool, I believe. And I would love to see something here. But there is nothing really reported about these areas of space. There is apparently a slight beachhead being built up, but as of yet, no real great expeditions in this area. But there are Imperial missionaries and things like that that really want to get at the humans there and try to convert them to the Imperium. I would love to see this group of lost civilizations band together and just completely kick humanity out with Dark Age tech they've been maintaining this entire time. That'd be really fun to see that kind of response, in my opinion. I would love to see that. This next world is called Agusia, or Agusia. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but distinctly this world is known as a cemetery world. There's not too many of those I've ever read about, but a cemetery world. And it's a lost human civilization from the age of technology, and apparently they would transport their dead to Agusia, and so it's some sort of vast monument and necropolis to this civilization. The Disciples of Thel have explored a small part of it in the northern reaches, but other than the polar zone being explored, not much is known about this world. They have found some really interesting parts of this world just in that small area. They are described as ornate sloping tomb fanes, huge dormant prayer mechanisms of a dozen varieties, mausoleums efficiently filled by stacked biers, and impassable walls of black-green metal set with intricate silvered magnetic runes, ornate hololithic displays of abstract art, somehow still active after the passage of many standard millennia. So, there's a lot of interesting stuff described here. This would be an interesting world to, again, set some sort of horror story or, like suspenseful exploration, and kind of like be an explorer of this, lost Age of Tech world. Maybe there's Dark Age of Tech here as well, or even hidden STCs. Who knows? Again, another planet that would be great to explore, and definitely holds my interest just by this brief description. Alright, and so then one of the next regions, one of the next planets is Nadush, or Nadush. This is a high plains, dry plains type of feral world, and this one's fascinating because this one has giant sprawling megacities that are basically abandoned, and the people that used to live there still do, but they kind of live in a post-apocalyptic type of tribal existence, and they don't live within these gigantic megacities. They instead follow herds of herbivores, and then kind of just claw and feed themselves off of those, and they do fight each other for honor and blood sport, but they don't really understand the advanced tech of these giant cities anymore. These cities seem to point back to the Dark Age of technology when they were built, so this is probably a prime area for exploration to find Dark Age type tech, maybe an STC, things like that here. There is a place here known as Marger or Marher, and it's apparently where the most powerful of the people here dwell, and it's a remain of one of the cities, and it's apparently 30 kilometers broad and 3 kilometers high. So it's a very large, section of city, and apparently inside there are giant ceiling vaults with enormous mosaics. I wonder what they display, like what do they show? Apparently this structure is so big that it creates its own weather system. So it'll just, cause raining to happen just spontaneously around it, things like that, because it is just such a massive inbuilt structure here. Now, perhaps one of the weirdest, not in like an unknown way, but in a more known way, is a planet known as Zaeth. And this planet is interesting. It's a war world, so there is a constant war going on, but it's no normal war. Apparently, it's one giant continent, known as a macro continent, and there are a few gigantic cities that are just moving around somehow and fighting each other. They're just in an endless war. These cities are just gigantic, massive bases that just are festooned with all kinds of weaponry, probably built during the Dark Age of technology, and they're just continuously fighting each other in some never-ending feud of some kind. Something that this civilization shares in common with the Imperium is they don't know how their own cities kind of work at their core. Apparently, they're fueled by great plasma generators and other types of esoteric power mechanisms, but some of these compartments are completely sealed and no one can get into them, but they still work. And some of them are guarded by specific guilds, specific orders of engineers, basically, who guard these areas from everyone else from being tampered with. But anyway, that's really it for this. Just imagine gigantic city-sized fortresses that do drive-bys against each other all the time, basically. Just kind of an interesting concept for a place to visit. Doesn't seem like there's much else left there, though, unless you want to go play at the depths of one of these fortress cities and see what secrets are left in their depths as well, I suppose. I'm just going to briefly mention a world known as Orn, because I found the explanation, the description for it, really funny. It's known as a forbidden world. The disciples of Thel found it, and there was a bunch of forests known as tangle forests on its surface, and there was emanations coming from there from half-buried warp drives inside of dead starships that had crashed there. And the explorators and the disciples of Thel found a warlike xenospecies that were basically using the vessel as a fort or town. And the disciples dropped survey servitors down to look on the world, and apparently the Xenos tore them apart and ate them. And so the disciples of Thel marked the world with a rune declaring it anathema to humankind, and then just left. They just noped out of this area. They were like, not worth our time. You guys can have it. See you later. And I just find that kind of funny that, like, it was just like, nope, not worth our resources. We're going to go somewhere less deadly, less murdery. You guys can keep your little, murder planet to yourself. So just found that kind of a funny footnote. And this is going to be the last world I talk about. This world is aptly known as Rain, and it is a wet grasslands and high plateaus type of world, and had harmless flora and fauna that was inedible to humans, but otherwise considered harmless. And so there was some colonies here, and the colonies that were here said that when they explored dense forested areas, that they found structures deep in these forests. And they also made note that the rain made a strange noise when it fell near them, which I wonder what that means. And after these reports, these were astropathic reports apparently from prospectors from these colonies here, nothing was reported from these colonies on rain ever again. The only thing that was said afterwards was a single garbled broadcast that raved about pale figures in the rain and sleek shapes in the clouds. So who knows what found the colonies here. Maybe, my theory is it could be the sloth, because that kind of sounds like the sloth a little bit. The sleek shapes in the clouds could be them. But also pale figures too could be them as well. But that's just pure theory on my part. There is some theory about this region of space that maybe some remnants of the Rangdan Empire and the Sloth are here, but, there's no reports of that at all. It's just kind of a popular theory among some people discussing this region of space. There is a direct quote from an astropathic message, and it just says, "There is no hope now. I have heard the voice calling. It is calling to me from the storm in the sky, and spoke of trespass and blood. And hearing it, I know it is the truth." So who knows what they have seen here. This kind of gives me a Lovecraftian vibe. Again, kind of a establishment to a neat little horror story. If you, had you being like a person that's helping just to explore this planet and starting to get stranger and stranger things that happen the deeper you go into these forests. What are these structures? Are they haunted? Are they being infested by some kind of species that is just naturally spooky? Who knows? So, just an interesting world I would like to see more of in a game or book one day, hopefully. And one of the last things, this is one of the last stories I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about one other xenospecies and call this one good, but there is a character from this region of space named Fenton Kale, and the most distinct thing about this guy is he apparently found a standard template construct that is intact, and it was on a dead moon circling twin red stars. And he comes back to the main port in this region of space known as Port Wander, and he tries to gather some support for this to find it, but he is a short time later assassinated. So the secret of where it is died with him, and then his ship was blown up a few months later through an overloading of its plasma reactors. So either someone knew that the STC was real and didn't want him to find it, or just bad luck happened in this case. And apparently to this day, there are fake maps known as Kale's Map, often sold to people just trying to make a buck off of this legend of a, lost SEC construct drifting out in space somewhere in this region. Now, possibly one of the most distinct threats coming out of this region of space are the rack ghoul, which are a xenospecies that first was encountered in a place called the Illisk depths, and this species looks almost kind of like xenomorphs a bit in some ways, but they are not exactly bipedal, but they do stand upright on 4 legs. They have a tail, and they can wield weaponry apparently, and they have ships and things like that, which xenomorphs do not have. So they're a bit different that way. They favor cybernetic augmentation of their warriors, and one of the most distinct things about this species is that, for one, there is no communication that has been established with them. They don't seem to be able to talk with anyone, imperial or otherwise, and their origins are unknown as well. Either they have a secret empire within this region of space, or they're some kind of nomadic species. Maybe they're even extragalactic like the Tyranids. It's not known for sure. And then one of the other things about them that is interesting is that they are able to navigate through the warp. They use warp engines to navigate, it seems like, and there doesn't seem to be any psychers amongst them. And apparently there is some rumor of some kind of symbology on them that they adorn themselves with that do seem to be reminiscent of chaos, but that is not confirmed. But either way, there doesn't seem to be an explanation for how they could be navigating the warp without any sort of psyker support. So there's a lot of mysteries that surround this species of Xenos. So believe it or not, that's only a fraction of some of the stories and overall region of this space. This area is very rich. I can see now why the Rogue Trader game chose this region of space to be the origins of the setting for what they're doing in Warhammer. It's definitely one of the better settings to pick. They can just pick from a lot of what I just went over. So hopefully in future expansions we get to do some exploring of some of these worlds that are as yet unknown and won't fall prey to what I find in a lot of Warhammer games where, like the worlds are kind of one note. They're all kind of that, Gothic architecture, because they take place on bombed out Imperial worlds a lot of the time. And that can kind of get a little bit boring when Warhammer actually has a lot more variety out there to explore and see. And it's something I often love to ponder about. These regions of space, these unknown regions, are a lot of fun, and I'm hoping that we get to see a lot more from them in the future. So that's really it for this one. If you liked it, of course, like it. You can dislike it if you choose as well. Some of you have been giving me feedback in the comments on what I could do better, and I really appreciate that. And please keep giving that to me. Please keep discussing with me in the comments. I love to discuss with you about the topics of these videos. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I really appreciate all the time and subscriptions so far. We are approaching 700 subscribers, which, in the grand scheme of things is small, but it's a accomplishment for me to hit that. So I would appreciate any of your support on that in helping me to get better at this. One of you said that I have a lot of potential, and that's why I'm doing this. I believe I do, in at least my knowledge. I know that there are a few things about my style right now that some of you may not like the best, but I'm trying to do things in a way that does not copy anyone else doing this as much as I can. I wanted to bring my own unique take on things. So, as always, I hope you have a great day or night wherever you are, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Talk with you soon. Thank you. And there is one last thing about this region that I almost forgot to put in this video, and I'm kind of surprised that I forgot about it, but as I was editing the video together, I realized I was missing an important story in this region that you can actually read about. It's one of the only times we get to go to this region. There is the Priests of Mars series. There's 3 different books about an expeditionary fleet there's an Arc Mechanicus ship, a continent-sized vessel that undertook what's called the Kotov Crusade, named after the Archmagos who runs this vessel. And they actually take an expedition into the Halo Stars. And I won't say too much more than that to not spoil it for those who haven't read it, but I highly recommend that book. It's one of the only times we get to go to that region. We don't really see much of the region, though, but we do get to see one world, at least, and get to see, a more interesting esoteric threat than is what is normal for a lot of 40k novels. It's by Graham McNeil, so it's a great series, a fairly recent one, too, and I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to know a bit more about this region, and also about the Speranza itself. That ship is one of the most interesting ships. We talked about it a little bit in a previous video on capital ships, on some of the biggest ships in the Imperium. So that's really it for this. I just wanted to throw this in here. This is kind of a after the fact part near the end here. But I did not want to put it out knowing before I edited and rendered it that I did not speak on this somewhat important part that actually speaks about this region. So anyway, recommend the series for you to definitely look at.